Have you ever noticed that dreams never seem to happen in a hurry? There's always waiting involved. And waiting is the hardest work of dreaming, don't you think? And what I'm asking you today is, while you wait, what steps can you take? So let me ask you, what's the impossible dream that God is calling you to dream? Is there something you've been trying to control, but He's asking you to trust Him? And I realize, friend, that trust is a very hard word to carry out. We can say that we trust Him with our dreams, but then we have to execute that trust, and that's easier said than done. There's an author that's a favorite of mine by the name of Henry Nouwen. He wrote a book called Sabbatical Journey. It's actually a journal that he wrote in the last year of his life. Extraordinary book. And in the book, he talks about some friends of his who were trapeze artists. And these trapeze artists explained to him the unique relationship between the flyer and the catcher. And the flyer, of course, is the person who lets go of the bar and flies high in the air, and the catcher is the one who is to catch the flyer. And they were explaining that there comes a point where the flyer is flying high above the crowd, and the flyer must let go. And at that point, this is the flyer's job: to reach out his or her hands, to be as still as possible, to close their eyes, and to wait to be caught. Yeah, right. In midair, we're supposed to be doing this. I mean, that goes against every instinct when you're flying through the air. And the trapeze artist explained that the worst thing that a flyer can do is to try and catch the catcher. When you try and catch the catcher, you're in a lot of trouble. You have to reach out your hands and be still with confidence and trust that the strong arms of the catcher will catch you. And I would guess that that's where some of you find yourselves right now. The brook has run dry. You feel like you're flying. Everything in you says, catch the catcher. Everything in you says, hit the panic button. And God says, would you trust me? Would you trust me? Would you reach out your hands and wait for the strong arms of the catcher? Keyword, wait. Trusting God in the midst of your dreams is super hard because sometimes trust requires waiting. How many of you, just by a show of hands, just love a good wait? You just love to wait. You're at the doctor's office, wherever, you love waiting. No one raises their hand. A few days ago, I found myself at Market Street in Colleyville grocery store, and I had a list. I'm on my way home, and Michelle had given me a list. That happens during the holidays. There's lists everywhere: shopping list, gift list, a to-do list. I had a list. And so I got my cart, and I made my way through my list, and it was quite festive in there. People were in good moods. Their Christmas music was playing. Food smells were wafting. There were samples available. That's always fun. It was just a jolly little holiday experience until I got to the checkout counter. And if I'm being honest, it was a little less joyful in the checkout line. And I did what I always do. Do you ever do this? Is it just me? You count how many people are in each line, and you sort of calibrate how much stuff each person has in their cart. And if you're really sick, and I am, you get in one line, and you choose a person who would have been you in the other line, right? Next to you. Is it just me? Does anybody else? Don't lie in church. Raise your hand if you do this. Yeah. And so it's kind of like a competition, and you kind of watch as you go through the line, and which one of you is going through fastest, and you mentally pressure the people in front of you. And on this day, I had chosen the wrong line. It looked fast, but I made a classic mistake. I ignored the age demographic in front of me. And there was a guy in an OU sweatshirt in line next to me. He was my opponent that I had chosen, and he chose the longer line, but he had younger people in front of him. He had debit card tapping millennials, and I had check writing baby boomers in front of me. And I had one lady who had the nerve to pay in cash, which is like, what is this, 1985? And to make things worse, she had a coupon. Seriously? A coupon? Who has time for a coupon, right? All this to say, I'm not very good at waiting. It's just not good. Have you ever noticed that dreams never seem to happen in a hurry? There's always waiting involved. And waiting is the hardest work of dreaming, don't you think? There's the waiting of a single man to see if God might have marriage in store for him. There's the waiting of a childless couple who desperately want to start a family. But day after day and week after week, their prayers go unanswered. There's the waiting of somebody who longs to have work that's meaningful and significant and seems to matter, but it doesn't happen. There's the waiting of a deeply depressed person longing for a moment that he or she will wake up wanting to thrive, but that morning never seems to come. Waiting is the hardest work of hope. And what I'm asking you today is, while you wait, what steps can you take? So let me repose the question. What's the impossible dream that God is calling you to dream? Maybe it's to go back to school and get that degree or start that new career, but you're not sure how you could make that a reality. What's the first step you need to take? Maybe it's to reach out and try to repair a relationship that seems beyond repair. Will you make the first move? Will you write the better and bigger story? Maybe it's to start the business or the nonprofit that God has laid on your heart, but you don't even know where to begin, honestly. Will you ask God for the courage to step out in faith? Maybe it's to believe God for healing from the anxiety or the depression or the hurt or the habit that's been weighing you down, quite honestly, for decades. When are you going to ask for help? When are you going to get real counseling? Maybe it's to start the ministry that God's laid on your heart. You feel unqualified to lead. Well, what are you prepared to do? Because God stands to write a bigger and better story. You're the only thing standing in the way sometimes. And what Mary realized in that moment is she was standing in her own way. And something happened that moment that occurred to her. Here it is. The outcome is God's responsibility. Obedience is ours. The outcome is His. He's got it. Don't try and catch the catcher. You can't see it. You can't hear it. You can't imagine it. You just need to accept it, to submit to it, to be obedient to it. That's what Mary did. She finally becomes convinced that God was writing a better story. And here's how she responds in verse 38. I am the Lord's servant. May everything you've said about me come true. Mary says, I'm your servant, here to honor you, Lord. Let's do this together. Because when you dream impossible dreams, you give honor to God, not yourself. God is up to something big when He plants this dream in our hearts, and it's so much bigger than us. Now, if we're able to achieve our calling in our own strength, we might tend to sweep in and take the glory. But when we stand at the base of an impossible mountain, shaking in our boots, knowing full well that our legs could never carry us to the summit, we are forced to rely on God and praise Him for every step He enables us to take along the way.